Hey everyone, this is episode 280 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I am James, joined by Paul and the birthday boy, Ryan. Happy birthday. Hope you had a good weekend.
Oh, I had a very, very good weekend. Yeah, I lived it up in Chicago over the weekend, so we did a lot of cool stuff and saw some absolutely fantastic concerts. And that was, I know that Goose is very good. It's the band that I went and saw, and I know that, but like seeing it live again was over the last few days was it was pretty great. It's cool to see a band. A lot of the bands I see are sort of not necessarily in their primes anymore. And This is a band that is very, very much in their prime. Maybe even a little pre-prime.
Oh, little underground. I don't know. I know nothing about music. I am not cool at all.
I've never heard of Goose until you mentioned them. So
there you go.
They're the next Fish. That's all you really need to know.
Oh, that explains a lot about why you like them. Yeah.
Is the animal thing intentional, or is it just a coincidence?
No, I don't think that part of it was it. There's a story behind it. I don't actually even know what the story is, but no, I don't think that was exactly what they were going for there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know nothing about them, but I'm glad you had a good time, and I support you doing things you like. So glad you, and we should all support things people like.
Milk toast. Congratulations.
You know what that was? That was a Meg Rowley quote right there.
It was. It was. Very
I encourage
much
people
so.
to like what they like.
I support you doing the things that you like doing.
Yeah, I do not enjoy jam bands, but I know you do, and I'm glad you had a good birthday weekend, Ryan. So there you go. All right, let's get talking about the Brewers because they're about 2/3 of the way through that 10-game road trip, and things are actually going pretty solidly. So we'll get to that in a minute. But first, a reminder, as always, you can become a patron at patreon.com/MKE Tailgate. Just $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered both on this podcast and on Reporting as Eligible, the Packers podcast with Paul. $5 a month gets you that question priority, plus some additional exclusive content, including that Minor League Extra podcast with Ryan and James Anderson from RotoWire. And you guys recorded an episode in the last week. What did you talk about, Ryan?
We did sort of a farewell to the trio of Terang, Mitchell, and Weimer, because those guys should have graduated by the next time we record. So we did a little bit of that, and then just went down the rosters and talked about where guys were. There weren't any super exciting assignments, but there were some, slightly noteworthy ones that he brought up about. It was interesting that this guy got assigned here. And then just took some questions. There was a very Carlos Rodriguez heavy episode of the Minor League Extra, which I think we might be having some more of those this year. I think things are trending good in that direction. So that would be kind of nice if we had a true breakout pitcher on our hands in Carlos Rodriguez. So, and that would be the pitcher Carlos Rodriguez, Carlos F. Rodriguez, as opposed to I don't know what the middle initial of the outfielder who can't really hit for power. Not sure there, but yes, Carlos F. Rodriguez, the pitcher. I think we're going to incorporate that and use that at some point if things work out here. So anyway, nice. Yeah, so excited about that. And of course, we talked about Churio, because
Oh yeah, got to talk about Churio.
Of course, we talked about Churio.
Hitting missiles at AA already.
Heck yeah.
Also striking out a ton. But,
that's the concerning part. Yep,
he's 19.
Not that concerning. I mean, he's up a level, and that's okay.
Yeah.
After a year, it'll be less okay, but it's okay now.
Yeah, I would rather he wasn't striking out as much as he is.
Sure.
But,
yes. And we will have a proper Reporting as Eligible next week.
Nice.
So question priority will be useful. We expected to do one before this because we expected the Aaron thing to happen before the draft significantly enough where it would require its own show. That, of course, did not happen because Aaron does not accommodate people. But the draft is not this week, but next week. And so we will do a little preview of that beforehand, in addition to all of the mini pods on the skill positions that we've done the last 2 weeks too. We'll do tight ends next week, which will figure heavily into the Packers, probably, although they're unpredictable, so you never know.
And hopefully not in the first round.
Yeah, it's not a good value bet. I actually have one exception to that. Save it for Reporting as Eligible, but
yes,
I do feel like scouting tight ends to be stars is way easier than people think it is. It's just finding good ones is hard, but finding great ones isn't. So
sure.
And there's a great one in this draft. So yeah.
So you'll have to listen to figure out who Paul thinks is the great one.
Although everybody who follows me on Twitter already knows that.
Yeah, I feel like I know already. But listen anyway. Look for that in the next week or so. All right. As I mentioned, Brewers, 2/3 of the way through that 10-game road trip out west. They lost 2 out of the 3 to the Diamondbacks in Arizona, but most of those games were pretty competitive. And then they rebounded by taking 3-4 from the Padres and really kind of dominating that series outside of the blowout by the Padres on Saturday night. Brewers really kind of took it to them, one of the teams that are expected to be one of the better ones in the National League. So that was kind of encouraging to see. They'll wrap things up in Seattle for 3 games before coming back home. So Ryan, I know you were traveling, so I'll ask Paul first. What have you seen of the West Coast trip, and your thoughts on how things are going so far? Are you kind of encouraged that they've kind of held their own 500 on the road, so to speak?
I'm encouraged that they've held their own and also held their own under some tougher circumstances because, they actually hit some roadblocks for the first time. We'll get to all of them, so I won't rip off a list right now. But they've managed to battle through some tough things, like the league adjusting a little bit back to some of the rookies, pitcher injuries, and some ineffectiveness as well, and battled through it to win some tough games. They won a 1-0 Wade Miley start today, which was, some of that's luck.
Mind-blowing.
You're not going to get a lot of 1-0 Wade Miley wins, but they did it. They played good defense. They locked it down. And so far, they've been able to win games in several different ways. Like sometimes the power erupts and they get multiple home runs from multiple guys. And they are still the pitching lab still works well enough and they have enough depth that they're always a threat to have kind of a shutdown game too. It's just kind of lining things up and hoping that, 1-0 is good. 1-8 is bad. I feel like last year they had a lot of the 1-8 games. They didn't line up their ones properly with their zeros. And so far that has worked out better. They've had better cluster luck this year, and that does matter too. But it's good. This is all good. Everything has gone very well so far.
Yeah, so I'm maybe at a bit of a disadvantage here because until the second half of today's game, I missed the first 3 Padres games entirely. All I saw was highlights. And so what I remember is those games against the Diamondbacks, and 2 out of the 3 of those were pretty damn ugly. All things considered. That first one, the Scott Berry game.
That was frustrating.
That was infuriating.
That stupid game. Like I almost don't count that game.
The thing is, Zach Gallen is one of the best pitchers in baseball and does not need anyone's help to be any better. And oh my God, was he getting just an obscene amount of help from Barry, and really to the point that it was beyond, and Jonathan Judge made this point on Twitter, that like there was a compounding effect beyond just like the 1.49 advantage. I don't know if you saw this on scorecards. The Diamondbacks had a 1.49 run advantage in a 3-0 game, which is obviously a huge deal. But Judge made the point that it really compounded because the fact that he was getting such absurd calls meant the Brewers had to be swinging at everything. And so they were all making really poor swing decisions. And I was sitting there on Tuesday going, I'm worried that like they're going to be out of their zone now, that like playing that game is going to have them all screwed up in terms of what they're looking for. And through the first few innings of the Tuesday game, it sure as hell looked like they were. And then they erupted and it was great. And no complaints. And so that worry was unfounded, or at least mostly unfounded. But yeah, just an absolute abomination. And for those that were watching on TV, you saw Vinny Rotino call it out right away. Well, the umpire's setting up too far inside.
Yep.
And so angle-wise, bad
technique.
Yeah, it's bad technique. And so right in front of him looks like a strike. And then who knows what the hell's going on over on the other side, because he's got such a weird angle. He's basically just guessing on the other side of the strike zone. And that's just, it's unacceptable. And his rating, he was in the 6th percentile in terms of umpire accuracy so far this year.
Yep.
And
he's bad.
Yeah, this stuff needs to get sorted out, and MLB needs to be more aggressive. And in this case, it seems like this isn't even a case of like you have to fire the incompetent or do something else with him. It seems like you just need to like coach him up and be like, hey, look, you're not in the right spot. And that's causing you to make these things because, and I'm sorry, I can't cite who pointed this out during the game, but somebody went and looked at his previous a home plate game, and it was the exact same problem. He was doing the same thing. And you're like, okay, so this is a persistent problem. Somebody at MLB needs to be like, hey, move your ass over a few inches.
Yes, they do. That should not be allowed to happen. Like, it's one thing to suck like in an unorganized way because you're untalented, like Angel and CB Buckner do, but it's like not do it right. You know, this is Major League Baseball. We don't let people play the game that don't do fundamentals correctly. That should apply to the officials as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, the irritating thing is he's not even like one of the new umpires. He's been around forever. Yep. Like he goes, I just Googled his first year was 2006. Why is he still lining up this way or doing things this way if like he's that much of a veteran? That blows my mind.
Well, actually, that's the explanation. So see, part of the thing here is it looks like being able to call a good strike zone is actually somewhat of an age relative thing. And I don't know if that's an eyesight thing, if it's just an overall, like, your body's in better shape, or if they've just got better at, like, coaching up and, like, selecting umpires as they go. But we talked about this a little bit over the winter. Those 10 umpires that retired last year, and I'm saying, like, retired with scare quotes because I think some of them may have been shown out the door. Those guys were every single one had come in during the umpire strike of 99. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a kind of a watershed thing, and there was a huge turnover then. So this cohort all came in, and every single one of them last year was well below average. Most of them were in the bottom third in terms of accuracy of umpires. And presumably MLB promoted a whole bunch of new guys, and those guys grade out better than this group. So we talked about, remember this, Paul? We talked about the fact that we thought there was going to be an uptick in umpiring accuracy this year because they got rid of so many poor umpires and were replacing them with presumably better umpires. And that probably is the case.
It probably is in the aggregate, yeah.
In the aggregate, because this one did stand out. And by the way, it was the 5th most inaccurate game of the season. Or I shouldn't say inaccurate. It was the 5th most that any one team had been favored over another, which surprised me for being that low. But then there was a CB Buckner game.
Yeah. I saw that CB Buckner game. That was something special. A lot of the were the Yankees involved in that one? I feel like I got there were a lot of Twitter complaints about it too. It was watched
the
by
Rangers, wasn't it? Might have been Yankees Rangers, but I think the Rangers were involved in that game.
Good old CB Classic there.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the last part of that Arizona series, because also that third game got kind of ugly.
Game.
Yes, it was a junk game indeed. And Jansen Junk had to start that game because Brandon Woodruff is hurt. And it looks like, unfortunately, he will be hurt for quite a while. So obviously he had to miss that start in Arizona. A few days later, they found out it won't just be the minimum injured list stay that they were hoping for. He actually had an MRI, and they found a grade 2 subscapular strain. So in English, that just means he strained something under his shoulder blade. Mm-hmm. But it still sounds very unpleasant. We don't know how long he'll be out, but the scary thing to me is that Woodruff, when he was talking, said if this happened like during the All-Star break, he'd consider being shut down for the entire season after that. So that's what, 2.5 months that he'd be considering there. So that's kind of scary to think about, maybe losing Brandon Woodruff for that long. But the good news, obviously, it's still April. He should be back at some point this year. But Ryan, I guess, how worried are you about the Brewers' pitching depth if they're missing Woodruff for that big chunk of a season?
Well, first off, I need to apologize to everybody for causing this to happen by picking Woodruff to be better than Burns. This is clearly my fault. Sorry about that, everybody. But yeah, this is definitely not what you like to see. This is a true problem, and I think is indicative of some important points. Like, first off, pitchers are always at risk of getting hurt. Like, this is just part of the deal. It is not something that the human body was really designed to do as often as they do it. Like, yes, the human body was designed to throw things, but not as often and not like at the kind of effort and repetitive nature as what, pitchers are asked to do. So this is just, part of the gig. And this is also why teams are cautious about giving extensions to pitchers. They're cautious about giving guys long-term contracts because it's so easy for things to go south on you. So this is a tough one. And I think that basically all we can hope here is that this doesn't turn into a cascading problem, because now you've already got Woodruff out for a long time. I believe, looking at it, Adrian Hauser is going to be making a rehab start this week.
Yep. Yeah.
So
he's getting closer.
Yeah, that's going to be useful. And I think the other thing to note here is that they actually were going to. It really wasn't the Jansen Junk game that was the thing. Craig Counsell said that they were going to be doing that no matter what. They had this on their calendar all along, that they were going to be using a 6th starter in that spot from the beginning of the season. Like going back into spring training, they were planning on doing that. It's just that it ended up having to be, Colin Ray coming up and making the next start after that, because Woodruff was out. So like they had to go even deeper into their depth there than they were planning to, but they are planning on giving guys that extra day. So giving them that 5th day of rest as often as possible. But that just did get harder with this Brandon Woodruff situation. So hopefully what Ray showed is that he's more ready right now than Junk is to step in and at least give them some useful spot starts, right? Like that's what we have to have our fingers crossed for. And it sounded like he has a new pitch, right? Like I didn't see this game, but I heard people talking about the fact that he had brought out, would you say a cutter?
Cutter's what I saw on Twitter, but cannot confirm. He mixed his pitches quite well, and just on his StatCast page, there's not any like standout. He did well with a 4-seamer and a sweeper and a sinker and a cutter. So I'm not even sure. I don't know Colin Ray's previous repertoire that well, but people were talking up a cutter, so I'm going to go with that for now.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not talking about Colin Ray as like a long-term guy that we want to see here. He's 32 years old. The average exit velocity is 90th percentile. Hard hits 12. Yeah, these not great, but he did do some things well. He was missing bats. He was generating some strikeouts and wasn't walking guys. So that at least gives you a place to start there while you're kind of scrambling and hoping to pick things back up. And I think the key here is going to be to get Adrian Hauser back and get him situated back into the rotation again. And that will feel better, especially after we had this week where we got great bounce back starts from not only Corbin Burns, which we already talked about, but also from Eric Lauer. So having that makes you a little less nervous about what else might go on here, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I should note too on Hauser, he was preparing to be a reliever, so there is some gradual buildup that's going to have to happen here. They mentioned he's going to start his next rehab start and probably go 3 innings, but I would just caution against expecting him to go 5 or 6 his first time out for the Brewers. That might be a piggyback situation there too, but still a better arm to have other than, Jansen Junk or whoever else they could call up from AAA. 100%. That kind of leads us to our first Patreon question of the week. Comes from Ken Maka on a bike in Waukesha, asking, if it's a worst case scenario for Woodruff and he's done for the year, what do we do? I'm having more fun watching the young guys get a chance this year so far than at any point last season. Is it time for a full rebuild and look to get maximum return on Adames and Burns while their value is at its peak? That's a little worst case scenario for me. Paul, I don't know.
Still the second best team in baseball right now. They have plus 28.
Yeah, they're doing really well.
They're 11-5, and their expected is 11-5, and like their strength of their team is Woodruff and Burns. Losing him is horrible, but it's not like he's like a 15-win player. He's like a 4-win player. You can get 4 wins other ways. Now, what kills teams is when they lose multiple guys. You can weather 1 or 2 reasonably well. But it's bad. But no, you don't sell based on that. That's ridiculous. This team is still doing quite well. Their young guys have still played quite well. There's reasons to be excited, and their pitching staff has weathered it okay so far. Like Colin Ray is not going to be good all season. All the things Ryan read off. That's a guy that he can give you a couple good starts, but Pacoda will hate. The underlying is bad. But like they have Hauser coming back. They have guys that they can plug in. They still have Burns, who we were all worried about him not missing bats, and then he showed up and missed a bunch of bats. They should be not fine, but they should be more or less fine if that's the only problem they have to deal with that's serious at all.
Yeah, and they still have, like, as long as Burns is sort of back to being Burns, and if that is where we're headed, is that Corbin Burns is going to go back to being a dominant starter again. And if Freddie's weird outing on Saturday, I'm led to believe.
It was weird. It was weird.
That was the number one descriptor I heard, is just didn't quite look right, and something was not quite right there.
Not to jump ahead, but the reason it was weird was usually when Freddie blows up, he walks a bunch of people and loses the zone and gives up home runs. And that didn't happen. He missed bats. He only walked one guy. And I wouldn't even necessarily say he got completely babbitt to death either. Just like a weird game where people strung hits together that don't always happen. So, and that Cronenworth, whatever guy I've never heard of, turned into Babe Ruth for a game. So,
oh
Jake
yeah,
Cronenworth's good, but yeah, that Padres.
I don't
lineup
stay up
is-
late and
is-
watch the West Coast. So
Yeah. No, it's fine. But that Padres lineup can be tough like that. That's really what made Wade Miley start on Sunday so unbelievable. Is like, is this the same team from last night? Because they look totally different.
yeah, they were like off a half step. It was like, did they all go and party or something last night? Is that what the deal was? Like, was that a hangover game? Like,
Varsity Blues game. That's right.
yeah, that one is bizarre. Anyway, this would be way early to even consider. Right now, you're looking at, because if you do have, what I was trying to get into here is, if you have Burns and you have Freddie sitting up there at the top of the rotation, well, now really what you need, if you're worried about Burns, you need like a mid-rotation starter. Those guys are not overly hard to get at the trade deadline, and the Brewers should have some chips that they can use to get somebody like that. So if Woodruff really is out for the season, you still have the frontline guys at the top that you need. It's not obviously as good as having Woodruff, but you can cobble together things. And if the offense stays, solidly above average the way it's been, then there are other paths to, 92 to 95 wins here, other than just really having Woodruff and Burns at the top of your rotation. They can get there other ways. So we don't have to necessarily worry about that. But on the off chance, if everything does go completely to hell over the next few months, and they're in a position to maybe do something like that at the trade deadline, we can cross that bridge when we come to it. But right now, like Paul said, like, they're one of the best teams in baseball. We don't need to really entertain that and like worry about that. That's a problem for future us. Hopefully not even future us. Maybe for
Also,
never us.
Not only are we 11-5, we're 11-5 with the Cardinals currently in last place.
That's even better. Yes.
At 7-9. I guess they're not. I guess Cincinnati passed them today. Good for them.
And with series where, like, against two of the teams projected to be at the top of the National League, and actually, honestly, if you take the Cardinals, three of the teams, we've already put behind us a series against San Diego and a series against the Mets.
Yep.
We've still got a lot of cream puffs on the schedule that we're doing. The Brewers are doing this against really good teams for the most part. So the softer part of the schedule comes later. And so that really has you like, oh, this might be a really, really good team. If it all sort of works out that way. You never know, but fingers crossed that things really couldn't be going a whole lot better in terms of what has actually happened on the field here. Now, obviously, the injury stuff is concerning, but in terms of what's happened on the field, we should all be ecstatic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bank those wins while you can, right? Like, that's what everybody keeps talking about with the Rays, too. They're probably not this good, but they're banking a ton of wins and a big lead in the AL East. Brewers likewise in the Central. And I kind of pointed this out on Twitter too, at least with, like the Mets and the Padres series, they're banking possible tiebreaker wins, right? So that's also important when it comes to possible seeding down the line too.
Yeah, I mean, we lost the tiebreaker last year, like at the All-Star break, right? And sometimes these things happen.
Yes. Yeah, you're not going to, obviously win a playoff race in April, but when we're in a system where tiebreakers are decided by head-to-head records and there's no game 163, that's where you're going to have to do it. So it's good to see them at least doing it so far. All right. Couple more questions on the pitching here. Next one comes from Mount Doom 98. Speaking of injuries, asking, in the vaunted pitching lab, do you think there is a quote unquote pitcher health component? Ryan, what do you think there? Obviously.
Yes, obviously there is. And and this is not just the Brewers. They're so much better at doing the pitcher health stuff than they used to be. Guys doing resistance training and strengthening and making sure that they're doing stuff that is not going to get them hurt when they're doing their lifting and all the various exercising they do to build strength. That is so much better now than what it was a generation ago or even a few years ago. If you watch sometime, you watch out in the bullpen if you're at a game and watch how some of these relievers are warming up and see some of the things they're doing, because there was a glimpse of it today. Devin Williams was doing some like lunges with a resistance band on his leg. I don't know if you caught that when it was like the 8th inning, maybe the 7th inning. He was out there starting to warm up, and you'll often see guys with those, what are those, like the flexi blades where they're kind of bouncing. It looks like a big long blade and they're bouncing it, and that's to loosen up the muscles in their shoulder. They have so many tools and so many different things now that pitchers can do that injuries are still a huge problem, because again, pitching is not something that like the human body wants to do naturally, way that pitchers are asked to do it, but they're being asked to do it at such a high intensity now too, that their bodies would just be breaking down like crazy if we hadn't improved the training methods that went along with that. And they absolutely have. So nothing is going to be foolproof. You're never going to get anything close to 100% pitcher health, I guess, except for the 2021 Brewers.
Yeah, we're actually much better than we used to be at developing more pitchers. A lot of pitchers who previously had the talent to make Major League Baseball would injure their way out before they ever made it, because training has improved vastly. And I know this podcast caters to these people already, but if you've ever read anything about the driveline methodology and findings around pitcher development, I think most of that is just accepted fact at this point. And I always like that, because a lot of it's based on a thing that Kyle Boddy noticed about football, which is that quarterbacks don't really throw out their arms when they're throwing. That part of the problem in baseball is actually that the ball is too light and your arm travels too fast. And so one of the ways we develop people now is with heavy balls. You can get a driveline rip-off version of plyo balls on Amazon for like $10. I have a set in my backyard for my kids to pitch with. And if you throw them, like, it's noticeably easier on your arm to throw the slightly heavier ball. There's just so much more science in the development that you get these guys who make the pros throw 95 who don't get hurt until they get here, when they're actually called upon to put stress on it for money. And so everybody's healthier as an aggregate group, but it's still hard because the act is still difficult in the professional setting, and you'll have guys who make it who are more prone to injury than some other guys who would have made it in the past. So that's all the lab in a nutshell.
And just to build on that too, I think high school and college coaches are, while still far from perfect, a lot better and a lot more conscientious about how they handle guys now than they were a while back. You don't see the Dylan Bundy where he was being asked to throw like 150 pitches and then come back the next day and throw like 40 more. That sort of stuff, you don't hear those horror stories nearly as much now as you used to, because coaches just, it would be irresponsible for them, and they know that people would hold it against them. Like the coach at Oregon State, it was known as a butcher for what he did and for other awful things he did. But that is not nearly the problem that it used to be. Coaches don't destroy young pitching the way they used to.
All right, Mount Doom has a second question here, asking, is there anything in the numbers that was significantly different for Corbin Burnes in his last start versus the first two? So we kind of mentioned that, obviously Corbin Burnes looked a lot like his old self against the Diamondbacks, really mowed guys down. They were talking about him looking the best that he's looked since even the combined no-hitter game 2 years ago, which is kind of high praise. That's sort of like his ideal of how effective he was. And to kind of match that level, he was just super impressive, mowing guys down left and right. So I guess, Paul, if you've got the StatCast up, what was there that was the noticeable difference?
It's subtle, but it looks like his velocity was up just a tick from the previous games, and honestly, just whiff percentage way up. He was clearly much more deceptive and just missing bats way more than before. So I suspect he just had some early season issues where he had to work out some funk, and when he added a tick back to his pitches, that it kind of worked itself out. That'd be my guess and read on it in terms of from the Mets game to the Diamondbacks game.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like it is the whiffs. Like he just started missing a lot more bats than he had been, and that was the Corbin Burns we're used to seeing. It's still, I think he only had what did he have, like 9 strikeouts in 8 innings in that game, and so that's still not like I mean, we've seen Corbin Burns striking out like in the teens. Like that is a thing he will routinely do when he's really at his best. But this was definitely a huge step in the right direction for him, and a sign for and a cause for a lot of optimism.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was efficient with the pitches too. That's why he was
almost
so...
pulled the Maddox. Almost.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I do remember, I think the strikeouts came a little bit more in bunches earlier, but he was just kind of cruising by the end of that. So I wouldn't read too much into the K9 there either.
That's true. It looked like he was pitching to contact towards the end, right? Like he was looking to, because he knew they weren't gonna like hit him very hard until the 8th inning, where that did seem to be like he kind of ran into a little bit of it, and that's what caused him to not be able to pitch that the 9th.
Yeah, but still super encouraging start for Corbin Burns. I think we all feel a lot better now, just knowing that that's still in there, right? And not that he was kind of the guy muddling through 4 or 5 innings that we'd seen the first couple of starts.
Yeah.
Luke Korisukis has a question here. Another guy that we've talked about a little bit already, Colin Ray, asking, is Ray smoke and mirrors, or is there some legitimacy to his performance against the Padres? So we kind of talked, you'll take those outings if you can get them, but I mean, he is a former top prospect. I guess maybe most famously had a trade canceled because he was hurt and they had to redo a trade. But you know, Paul, I guess, is there anything there that you could see encouraging, at least as like a 5th starter fill-in guy?
I think he's mostly smoke and mirrors. I was hoping to look at his StatCast page and his like pitch log and just see like this one pitch just over and over and over again, because that would be more indicative that we've created something. And like his sinker looks good, but there's a lot of stuff in there. So, you know, I watched that game. I thought that he did get a little bit lucky with some of the results on contact. He's old. I think we know what we have here. I think he is just a guy. They can probably squeeze a little bit more efficiency out of him for a little while than most teams can. But no, I don't think that you don't have anything other than, you know, a cup of coffee guy here who pitched well, to his credit. But the league will come for him eventually if he's up here too long.
Yeah, and I'm going to make a comp here, and it's going to make people's heads explode and cause much consternation. But actually, the comp here is kind of Jason Alexander.
No.
I'm
glad you went that way instead of a higher way. But yeah, I mean, continue your thought. But I agree with your general sentiment here. I'm on board.
Well, so in his first 30 innings in the big leagues last year, Jason Alexander was able to put up a 3.82 ERA. And I think that what happened was, as teams saw more and more and more of him, they started to say, okay, he does these certain things well enough, and if we don't fall for these tricks and pound the ball into the ground, where this is what he's trying to do, he's trying to get it to get us to pound the ball into the ground. If we don't fall for that, we can get him into a rough position and whatever. And so obviously after that, he was a much worse pitcher than he was at first. So the hope here is that you can run Colin Ray until he no longer is fooling people. You can get by with the tricks with the smoke and mirrors for a little while, and then go ahead and turn it over to more talented pitchers. Hopefully Robert Gosser, Adrian Hauser's back. Hopefully Brandon Woodruff comes back. You can start to bring in more talented players and not have to rely on Colin Ray to be pitching for you in the summer the way that the Brewers were counting on Jason Alexander to pitch then.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And just the quintessential, the last guy on the bench, just a guy kind of guy that you can squeeze the tricks out for a little while, but eventually he'll get figured out.
Yep.
I will say too, though, that this year's Brewers defense a lot better than last year's. So, you know, if you are running a pitch to contact guy like the Jason Alexanders or the Colin Rays of the world, maybe you get a little bit luckier with the results, right? Like that's also where Alexander ran into problem. He was tightrope walking almost from the start, and then he fell off the tightrope at the end.
Yeah, it's almost more though that if you can actually keep getting strikes with your sinker down in the zone, and as soon as you run into a problem where you are not be able to locate properly, or you have to go up or anything like that, you just get hammered. So that's that trick works if your sinker's good, and I'm not sure that his really is that good.
Yeah, actually, I will say here, looking at this, so obviously, why am I completely blanking on the fact that we got 6 innings of Colin Ray in 2021?
We did?
Yeah, Colin Ray pitched for the Brewers in 2021 for 6 innings.
Huh.
I have no
Nope,
memory
I got
of
nothing.
this whatsoever.
Pulling up his game log right now. How'd he do?
I mean, he gave up a lot of runs. 6 innings, and he gave up 4 runs. So he had a 7.50 ERA. Yeah, like he wasn't particularly good.
2 dingers.
Yes, looking at what he did here for the Brewers, obviously, you know what really stands out here is he did generate a lot of ground balls. He had 50% of his balls in play were on the ground. If he can keep doing that, as James mentioned, with the defense that they have, that's going to be to his benefit. Like that's really, really basically with this pitch or with this defense that the Brewers have, you need guys who are going to keep the ball in the ballpark. If they can keep the ball in the ballpark, your defense will do a pretty good job of helping to clean that up for them and to make sure if you can especially keep it on the ground, but even if it's getting in the air, those outfielders can chase down a lot of stuff. So keep the ball in the ballpark, and that is a path to success for the Brewers this year. If you're coming in as like a spot pitcher for them, just keep the ball in the ballpark.
Sure. All right. Shifting our focus to the bullpen, still pretty solid so far. Our next question comes from Jay Google, talking about Gus Varland. Actually, if you didn't see this, kind of a scary moment on Saturday night. 105-mile-an-hour line drive for Manny Machado. Glanced off I guess it got his arm first before it blasted him in the chin.
Thank goodness.
Yes, because that could have been real bad. He luckily seems to be okay, at least after the game. Said he wasn't missing any teeth or anything and doesn't seem to be concussed, but still super scary. But Jay's question here is asking, is Varland getting hit Saturday by a Machado line drive and Guerra and Payamps being inconsistent? Which guys do you think will be the first called up from AAA? So, Ryan, obviously, another bullpen question here for Jay. I guess if we need to call up a reliever from AAA to replace any one of those guys, who do you think is first in line?
Yeah, first off, they do currently have the best bullpen ERA in baseball, and that only got
Yes,
better
they
today, 2.36. So, and there's a big difference between the ERA and the FIP here. So, and just so Judge's head doesn't explode, point out that FIP is scaled against runs allowed, not earned runs allowed. So, like, you would expect a team to have a their ERA, there should be a gap between their ERA and their FIP because it's scaled to runs allowed, not to earned runs allowed. So anyway, just making sure we get that in there. Because I know he's made that point in the past. He didn't complain about it last week, but I felt bad about it and I didn't mention it. So let's just go ahead when we're talking about FIP, because FIP is the inferior DRA anyway. So
Yep.
There you go.
Anyways, what was the question again? Oh, call-ups. Call-ups from AAA. Yeah. So
Yes.
guys in the bullpen in AAA, I think that, boy, so the Ethan Small thing, he is doing the Ethan Small thing, man. We talked about this on the Minor League Extra. Holy cow, is he has 9 strikeouts in 5.1 innings now. And that's actually gone down from where it was before. I think he had like 6 of his 8 outs were from the strikeout, so he was just incredible. But he
How
also
many
has
walks?
he also has 6 walks.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's at his most sort of Ethan Swall, but if he can get that sort of figured out and make that work, which I think there's a pretty good chance of, I think you have a guy there that's going to see some innings and maybe some high leverage innings once he gets that sorted. Because the stuff there, just like he's gonna murder left-handers, no matter if they're in AAA or Major League Baseball. Peguero looks like he's off to a really, really nice start in terms of the separation between the strikeouts and the walks. He has a 5 strikeout to walk ratio, so that's really, really nice. So I would expect that we're going to see Elvis Peguero at some point. Tyson Miller, who was a big hero in camp for them, everybody was clamoring for him to make the roster based on how good he looked. A 3 strikeout to walk ratio, and that's really how I evaluate relievers, is you look at how much they're striking out versus how much they're walking, because the rest of it is kind of fungible. Like that stuff in small samples, kind of anything can happen. But if you get a split between the strikeouts and the walks, that's usually you're getting 80% of the way there for pitchers. So those guys would be ones that I would expect that we will see at some point. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that our own James Anderson thinks that we're going to see Cam Robinson at some point this season, and that certainly would make sense based on the fact that he's on the 40-man, and he's striking out 16.2 per 9 right now. So he has 9 strikeouts in 5 innings. So also walking guys, but that's kind of part of the deal here, and I think they're willing to deal with that. And I think especially this team is going to be willing to deal with that because they can get themselves out of some jams with the good defense that they have. The main thing is just keep the ball in the ballpark as much as possible. And they do have guys who've given up some home runs. Like Ethan Small has given up 1. But those other 3 have yet to give up a home run. Oh, I'm sorry, Peguero does have a home run. So keep the ball in the yard, keep the walks down as much as possible, and keep the strikeouts really high. And those will be the guys who get their chances.
For sure. Let's move on to other areas. Price Trojan asking about the catching. Ask his question here this week. Who do we have to write a letter to make sure the Brewers catching lab team doesn't get poached? I'm not sure which stats to look at, but it sure seems like what they're doing is working. As I always say, Charlie Green's a witch, but Paul, I guess your thoughts on the catching lab, so to speak.
I mean, it's almost a beyond belief incredible. So I know this made its rounds on the net, but William Contreras is currently in the 96th percentile in framing. A guy who is not well regarded in framing coming into the year, where when the Brewers acquired him, everybody said, well, defense is liability. He's a bad framer. And he's instantly better. Like, it's really, really something. And this keeps happening. They bring guys in and they fix their framing and their catching game very, very, very quickly. It happened with Omar. It happens with literally everyone. They're the best at it. And yes, they should pay those people as much money as they want, because it's a real weapon for them to be able to go and get flawed catchers and just turn them around, like without seemingly, I'm going to say not with any effort. I'm sure it's a lot of effort, but like with, it's consistent, and you never see things get fixed like this in baseball this consistently for anything at any level. So yeah, it's like one of the best organizations, like sub-organizations in baseball for any skill development.
And we would be remiss if we didn't also mention, Walker McKinven. I didn't even get the guy's name right. Walker McKinven, who it also does. It's not just Charlie Green. Walker McKinven is also working on this sort of stuff. He works heavily with the catchers, and so we should mention him as well. There was an article in the JS about him back in 2021, so you can go back and look at that if you want. But this is remarkable. At this point, I don't even know what to say. It's got to be. It has to go beyond just like any one person, right? It can't be just Charlie Green. It's also, like I said, Walker McKinven. And other people up and down the organization. There has to be like some sort of concerted effort here. And they also seem to have like reading about what the kind of work that is done. And McKibben was actually quoted in that article from Kurt about this week in the Journal Sentinel. So check that out.
Yeah.
But the amount of thought and things that go into the amount of technique that is involved in receiving pitches, calling a game, and like putting your pitcher in the best spot to succeed would blow everybody's mind if you knew how much these guys are actually working and how much they have to keep in their head and be thinking about all the time on this stuff. The technique is so important, and there's so much that goes on with it. And the fact that the Brewers seem to just be so good at instructing it is gobsmacking. Everybody in the game must just look at the Brewers in awe and just wonder, how are you doing this with our guys? That like Seattle had Narvaez for how long before, like
a couple of years.
Yeah, for a couple of years. And then like he comes to the Brewers and instantly is one of the best defensive catchers in the game, like right away.
Even Contreras, with all of his ground ball issues and whatever, like just with the barrels and exit velocity he puts on the ball hitting, if the rest of baseball was like, oh, we can just turn him into one of the best framers in baseball, no problem. Like the Brewers wouldn't have him. He would have gone for a lot more to a bigger team. And nope, they just pull it off, and it's really incredible. They must have a great process. They must have a great repeatable process that they just know what to put guys through and what results to expect, and it just works. It's awesome.
Well, and also there must be some really good like motivational work going on there, because I can imagine to get catchers to be willing to just continually have to do that stuff and put in that time when they know that they're being judged. Like they know that they're getting judged on their defense. They know that teams are watching that and that it's going to mean a lot to how they get paid, but they also know that people are really paying attention to what they're doing with the bat. And so to continually put in that much time, you've got to like the amount of like encouragement that has to take to get these guys who are already like physically beaten down by the position to continue to do that. I can't even imagine, putting in that kind of time and effort and work just over and over and over and over in such a physically demanding and mentally demanding way. It's kind of astounding.
Yeah, my brain would be leaking out of my ears,
right? Like
after
a week.
Like, yeah. All right, our next question comes from Mark Podscarby asking something we kind of referenced earlier. Are you guys scoreboard watching yet with St. Louis? If not, when would an appropriate time be to begin? Well, we already mentioned that they were in last place, which, it's 2 weeks, but it's always fun to mention when the Cardinals were in last place. I guess, Paul, are you paying attention to what the Cards are doing, or are you not? Okay.
No, I'm scoreboard watching. And I always kind of watch the Cardinals as my secondary team, as long as they're the clear other favorites in the division. And not only are they bad so far, they have the worst run differential in the division. Not horrible, but -7. And they seem to have real problems. Like their offense hasn't been quite as good as you would expect, and their pitching. Everything Ryan has said about their pitching, I think, has shown up. It's disguised a little bit because their stadium is so stupid, but they've looked like a mess, and it's good when they're a mess. It's fun. It's good to watch that. So it's never too early for that. And on the other half of that, like the Cubs look halfway competent, which is also a little unnerving. But it's early. We'll see if that probably won't keep up, right? But the Cardinals, like they look real bad. Like we might have something here. This might be a bit of a rough one for them.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that, currently the Cardinals are. Wow, it's actually not nearly as bad as I thought. The Cardinals are below league average in terms of runs allowed per game. They're at 4.67, and the league average is 4.73. So I wouldn't have expected that. So I wonder, are they just not scoring then? Like that's got to be what it is, right? Like they've got.
So that's not good pitching for St. Louis,
right? Correct.
Because that park is a stupid pitcher's park. So they're scoring. Okay, they're not scoring that well. It is a problem, but the pitching's, I think, been the main problem. But I mean, their guys aren't hitting super well. Like Nolan Gorman's been their best guy by leaps and bounds. But like, there's Lars Nootbaar is good. That's annoying too. But they've got a lot of like sub 800 OPSs that they don't normally have to. So it all bet. You know who sucks? You know who's fun that sucks? Wilson Contreras has been horrible.
Yes.
Horrible with the, you get him for the bat. And he has not been able to hit, and he has regressed as a defensive catcher as well. So that's also a big part of it. He's been atrocious.
Well, I'll tell you what, they are at 4.13 runs per game. Oh, okay. There's a major incongruence between their runs per game is 24th, but their OPS plus.
I was gonna say their offense just on paper doesn't look too bad.
No, their OPS plus is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. The Brewers are 5th, by the way, or they were coming into today. But the Cardinals are 7th.
Been good, and Nootbaar's been good, and Nolan Gorman's been good, and Arenado hasn't been super good, but he's still been plenty good. And just on that, they should have a pretty good offense.
Okay, so their sequencing here is actually poor, and so they're way underperforming what you would expect them to do. They're not scoring nearly as many runs as they should based on how well they're hitting. Is the thing here. So they're going to come back up. We've not heard the last of the Cardinals, but that pitching is scary in a lot of respects. I mean, Miles Mikolas, who they're really counting on to be sort of their front guy, even if he wasn't like their most talented pitcher, he was supposed to be their big innings eater and that guy, and that he certainly hasn't done that to date. I've taken that on the chin on a fantasy team or two with him. So yeah, it very interesting. But yeah, I suspect we're going to see them back before too long here. And the Pirates should go away nicely relatively quickly, I would think here.
Especially with O'Neal Cruz going down. Like, that's a big blow for them.
And that's really
unfortunate.
Yeah, that sucks because that guy is just baseball kind of needs more guys like that where you just go like, that dude's just a physical freak. Like, it's kind of like when you'd watch like Giannis play when he was younger and you're just like, you don't see that very often. That's not normal. And baseball could use all the O'Neal Cruz that it can get in its life. And I have to suspect when he comes back from that kind of injury, we're probably looking at him not being at shortstop anymore, right?
No.
Like
First base, DH, yeah.
Or even the guy probably could play. Like everybody said, they thought he had the foot speed to be a really good center fielder. So
yeah,
sure.
I mean, if he doesn't have that anymore, maybe a left fielder would be fine. Like,
yeah. On the note of the Cubs, annoyingly competent so far, as we noted. Ian Happ is a 174 WRC plus. Patrick Wisdom's got 5 home runs in 12 games.
Yep.
Dansby Swanson, 119 WRC plus, looking good so far. Nico Horner, even above average at 104 WRC plus. So obviously those aren't going to stay as high, but like they've been hitting really well. I watched that crazy game they had against the Mariners this last week where they were down like 9-3 in the first or second inning, and then they came back and
all the way back.
Lead. It was crazy. All while like Jed Hoyer's sitting there cheering him on. It was kind of fun to watch. But yeah, I think Steele's looked like a decent pitcher. They're going to be annoyingly competent in a thorn in the side at least going forward, I think. Okay, Jay Google, another question here this week, asking just how big of a concern is it that Yelich has a 5.4% barrel rate, the second lowest of his career, and a 32% K rate and only a 12.8% walk rate? How long left on the deal? Steve wants to know, Ryan.
Oh, you guys are so blessed that you are not in that group chat, because every single time Christian Yelich does something poor, one of these guys is just, because they know it annoys me, so they just like every single time it gets like a mention in there, and I've learned not to respond, but they still do it because I think they sense it that it's annoying me. Now I'm saying it out loud, so I shouldn't do that. I'm just encouraging poor behavior here. But anyway, yeah. Okay, so is this our annual time to remind everybody that Christian Yelich is really, really weird? Like his whole entire profile, everything about him is bizarre.
Yeah,
he's weird.
And like this whole thing is just strange as hell. He did. I can't believe we haven't.
He pulled
mentioned it
one.
yet.
Pulled the home run.
He pulled a home run. Yes. Trust me. I knew about that. All of a sudden my phone's blowing up and I'm like, what the hell Christian Yelich pulled a home run. Okay.
I was tagged many times. Bless all of you. I appreciate it.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, there's stuff about his numbers right now. The barrel percent actually isn't as terrible. It's 33rd percentile coming into today. So coming into Sunday, it was 33rd percentile. So that's not like down in the basement. It's low
Well, he
for
only
him.
has 2 barrels.
But the point is that it's low for him, but it's not necessarily low for like within the
I
whole
think
context.
it's low for the league. He has two barrels. That's low.
It's 33rd percentile though. It's not like he has some numbers. His K percent after today, because he struck out like 3 times today. His K percent's got to be in the bottom 10%.
I'm sure it is. Yep.
And like his whiff percentage is higher than it normally is.
Mhm.
The thing is, he still has, and actually, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to listen to the Minor League Extra yet. James did kind of a primer on this stuff, primer, I guess, on how to read some of these things, especially for prospects. And he said he's a big proponent of max exit velocity, or if you can find it, 95th percentile exit velocity, because it gives you a much better idea of what like a guy is truly doing in terms of that. He said he doesn't like average exit velocity much at all. He says it's kind of a fake stat because it incorporates too many like poor contact outcomes and things where guys are just hitting little numbers and whatever. Is that really a truly good indicator in his opinion of that stuff? But he also like hard hit percentage also is better than like average exit velocity. So that was kind of his breakdown on that. But as I was telling a coworker this week about the Christian Yelich, he was asking me about this, and I'm like, I still don't understand. 73rd percentile in walks, guys. Why? Why is anybody afraid of him? Why? Eternally mystifying why people still continue to be afraid to throw him strikes. Because you would think people would just pound the strike zone on this guy now, and they don't. Makes no sense.
I don't know.
It's weird. His launch angle is 2.4.
I was just gonna pull that up.
Almost the ground. That's not good.
2.4 is not far off the ground. No, it's not. I don't know. It's weird, but hey, he's got 2 home runs already, so maybe he'll hit 15, like we talked about. What was his 90th percentile? Like 19
22.
home runs or something? It was something weird like that.
I need 20 just to like shut Steve up. Like more than anything, just I need 20 to just shut him up.
It may take a 40% K rate to get there, but damn it, he'll try.
Yeah, I think we're heading in that direction.
We're gonna find out. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last Patreon question this week before we wrap things up comes from Adam Post asking, in the interest of getting way ahead of ourselves, we love doing that here. Which of Terang, Mitchell, or Weimer could also throw in Frelick if you're so inclined? Do you extend the contract to first or at all? So I guess of the freshmen, Paul, if you wanted to lock him up into a Brave style deal, which would you pick?
I think a Brave style deal, like if you get, I guess Mitchell. I would do Mitchell. Probably the minority there, but I like the defensive floor and the speed and all that stuff. So Frelick might be what my second one. I think out of the rest of them, he's my second favorite and is just being held down. Weimer, I got to see a little bit more out of before I really 100% want him around. And I like Terang. I got to pay more attention to Terang. I guess I have an infielder bias, but I would do Mitchell first because I still am high on his upside. But they're all fun and good, so it's just splitting hairs.
I think the answer here is Frelick, and we could see that potentially like doing that right around the time he would be called up. That would be.
You are also right that Frelick is down because he's the most valuable one.
There is some of that going on, but also just like the roster fit right now. Weimer is up over Frelick because Weimer's a right-handed hitter and because he's a right fielder. Like those are the reasons that Weimer is up. And actually we did get, Jay Google sent us this thing. Do you guys have that handy about why Weimer, his numbers are pretty poor in terms of StatCast.
Yes. Yep.
And I think that you're looking at a situation where he probably could benefit from some more time in AAA, and he does seem like a good candidate for when Tyrone Taylor is ready to go for Weimer to go down. I think that's unless he really turns it around. Now, I will say, to repeat what James Anderson pointed out on the Minor League Extra this month, because guys, like, if you had told us that Joey Weimer, and this was at the time of recording, he was striking out like 23% of the time. If you had told us that, James said, if I knew he was going to be striking out that much over, like, say, a rookie season, I would put him in my top 25 prospects overall in baseball, just because that was the biggest concern, and they weren't sure like where that was going to end up. And his strikeout rate is now up somewhat, still only 45th percentile in baseball, though. Like, this isn't that bad. Where's the actual number?
He's also been...
Yeah, he's only striking out 23.1%. That's really, like, it's below the league average for strikeouts from Joey Weimer, who we all
Weimer's
thought...
also...
Yeah.
He's been victimized a little bit by being the short side of the platoon and not being protected that much. He has faced righties 41 times and lefties just 11. And he's mashed the lefties when he's faced them. So that's, there are obviously more righties than lefties, but it's usually not that out of whack, especially for a team like the Brewers, who tend to protect people at least a little bit, kind of across the board. So his numbers are even a little bit lower than they probably should be, with a more even split on the platoon side.
Well, he's out there every day because of the defense. And also he's playing center field against left-handed pitching. So that's helping him to stay out there. But I think we probably will see more of, like Taylor, Frelick. It's all a little bit difficult too, because at a time when maybe potentially Winker could have been starting to see some outfield work, he ends up with getting sick because of his did you guys see Andy Schaff's tweet about that? It was so good. I don't even have kids, and it cracked me up.
Yeah, it was kid-related sickness, and yes.
Yeah, it was pretty brilliant. So just pointing out that Jesse Winker has like a 2 or 3 year old kid, so of course he got like the devil flu. Like, of course he did. Why wouldn't he? So but Weimer's numbers are low, and actually, to be fair, Terang's StatCast numbers are also pretty poor. Like average exit velocity, I'm not even going to cite that because James told me not to. Max exit velocity 22%.
It's still a good stat.
Yeah, like those things, not the like barrel percentage, 20th percentile, like all these things bad. But the defense is the carrying tool, and I think his approach, I really, really believe in Bryce Terang's approach. And I think that for that reason, I just think that the floor for him to be like probably an above average shortstop, just because like defensively, I think he's going to be very, very good there. Like, he is an exceptional second baseman, but I still think he's going to be an above average shortstop. I think that you can get away with a lot there, and he doesn't need to have huge offensive production to be a average to above average player overall there. So I think that makes him a really good candidate, where it's harder with Weimer and Wright because the bat does have to play pretty well there. Though, like I said, that strikeout rate being under the league average was eye-opening, considering that's been our main worry about Weimer this whole time, is that he wasn't going to be able to make consistent contact, and he was going to be whiffing all the time. So that is a positive to take away from that. There's definitely stuff to work with Joey Weimer, even if he isn't yet making the consistent hard contact that we all figured he would.
Like getting a hit on a non-fastball?
Yeah.
That was what we were talking about. He literally is hitting triple zeros against breaking pitches and off-speed pitches this year. Bryce Terang's at least hit a breaking pitch this year. So
yeah,
these are tiny, small samples, but kind of, like we were talking about, after his hot start, eventually the league would figure him out. And this seems to be an early sign of them maybe figuring him out. Small sample size indeed, but like still not great. And that kind of plays into the hard contact or whatever, because they're basically figuring out how to get him out. But yeah, hitting 346 on fastballs this year and 000s on 88 breaking pitches, hasn't hit one. 20 off-speed pitches, hasn't hit one.
Oh boy.
46.5% whiff percentage on breaking pitches. I think we found how to get Joey Wiemer out.
It does make sense when you watch him. I've never seen anybody swing harder at breaking pitches. And it's not working.
Yeah, he's going to have to adjust to that. Like, that is a thing he's going to have to figure out, is how to lay back on those pitches in a way that he hasn't to date, because you can basically make your way up through the minor leagues just beating the hell out of fastballs. That is a way to get to the big leagues, is to just beat the hell out of fastballs. But you can't have a major league career beating the hell out of fastballs, because they'll stop throwing them to you as much as you'd like to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that'll do it for Patreon questions this week. Thanks everybody who sent one in. A reminder, patrons get question priority, a guarantee that we talk about your question here. You also get a shout out when you become a new patron, and we've got a couple newbies joining us that you wanted to mention, Ryan.
Yeah, Judge has been knocked off his perch because was the top guy on our patrons list for like a month plus there. But we do have some new blood in. Thank you very much to Johnny McCauley for joining up, and also to Walt.
Just Walt.
Thanks, Walt. Thanks, Johnny McCauley.
Yep. So I don't know what the last name. I suppose we could probably look it up, but if he doesn't choose to put it there, we're not going to put it out there. We won't dox you, Walt. We'll just go with Walt.
No. Thank you guys for signing up. Thank you all again who have signed up. $2 a month. Reminder at patreon.com/MKE Tailgate gets you that question priority. $5 a month gets you all the extra goodies too. The reporting as eligible mini pods leading up to the draft, the minor league extra, all that fun stuff. So go check it out there. That'll do it for this week. The Brewers will wrap up their road trip against Seattle for what should be a fun 3-game series there before they come home later in the week, and they'll face the Red Sox, who also maybe kind of stink this year. So hopefully a good weekend home against Boston. But we will be back next week to recap all of that and anything else that happens here on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good weekend.